Hello, welcome to Meet the Author, sponsored by Author Event Network in partnership with the Bremerton Public Access Television. I'm your host, Guy Morris. Author Event Network is a nonprofit association of local authors who sign books at local festivals, fairs, and events. Our guest today is Stephen Craig. Hey, Stephen, how you doing?
Real good.
It's great to have you. You're a new member, so this is great for me to kind of get to know you. This is a wonderful opportunity.
Yep.
Let's start by telling us you have 3 books written to date. Tell the audience a little bit about what inspired you to become an author.
Well, the first one was Chronicles of Katrina, and that was inspired. I had been sent to Hurricane Katrina 5 times for the Coast Guard as a reservist. And every time I went down there, I would send daily emails back home. And with 5 details, that was, like 3-4 months worth of emails. So when I got back, I had several people tell me, I'll write a book, put the emails together, which is what I did. I put that there, and that was my first one. And then my second one was Traveling to Italy. Has basically nothing to do with much, but we like to go to Italy like every 18 months, and so I wrote a book about Cinque Terre, Venice, and so forth. And then the third one was the All Present Accounted For, which is the current book there. And that one was based on an event back in 1973. I was down at the station at Base Honolulu as a yeoman, 3rd class, and I ran across one of the crew members who was there, and he was telling me about the Jarvis almost sinking 6 months prior. And I'd never heard of that, and nobody had ever heard about it. And so that story stuck with me. And then I had various occupations up to about 2018 when I decided to finally retire. And I decided to write a magazine article about it, and it exploded. I interviewed 35 of the former crew members, 10 people associated with the rescue. And that just went from magazine article into a book form. And I got hold of the ship records from San Bruno, from the record center down there, because I was getting all these stories, but I had put them in a timeline. And so I got the ship records, and I was able to put it into a timeline.
Okay. So I take it then that all your books are based on true stories?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are they independent, or are they part of a series?
They're all independent of each other.
Okay. And so now it sounds like 2 of them deal with your personal experience, and one of them was deeply researched. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit more about the Chronicles of Katrina. What is it about those emails and that experience that made you feel like it should belong in a book? And just an aside, I'd love to talk to you. I was actually part of the early team brought in before they'd even opened up the city with Microsoft to try and help them rebuild their infrastructure from a technical perspective. So I was in Katrina at that time as well, and it was pretty life-changing event to see that much destruction up close.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
they sent me down there 5 times. The first time, the Coast Guard, I was a senior officer down at Alexandria, Louisiana. And that was sort of amusing because we had a big old meeting. There's like 50 of us in the room, and things seemed to be in disarray. And I was a commander, and I looked around and said, who the heck's in charge around here? And somebody looked around and said, well, you are. Oh, okay. So I did that detail for a couple weeks, shut it down, transferred all the rest of the operations to New Orleans down the sector office. And then I did a 2-month detail. They recalled several of us to, we were part of a 9-person Coast Guard team. The state of Louisiana wanted an evacuation plan, so they hired 3 civilian companies. And the Coast Guard, we were supposed to be monitors, make sure it was going the right direction based on the incident command system and so forth. And within a week, they made me the operations section chief, because when you put 3 competing companies together, that's not pretty. And within another week, they made me the deputy incident commander because they needed more guidance. And that was one of the best jobs I ever had. It was great. I enjoyed working with the civilians, and the Coast Guard people were the best we had. So that was a great experience. Another time they sent me down to Sector New Orleans to rewrite the continuity operations plan, because following the disaster, they found out they only had like a 13-page guide. And if you're writing an effective continuity plan, it's got to be 100 pages. You got to have backups to the backups, everything planned, relocation sites, so forth. And I was recognized as one of the top experts in the country. I'd rewritten Portland sector COOP plan. So they sent me down there for a couple months to write that. So that was a very good experience. But after every detail, every night, I would write emails back of what I observed around New Orleans, around Baton Rouge, whatever, Mobile, Alabama, and I would send it back. And so when I got back, a lot of people said, you should put that in a book form. And so I did, along with some emergency preparedness tips, that kind of stuff. And
now, does it read more like a story? Does it read more like a journal? What's the kind of the theme of the book?
Probably more like a journal, because it was just my observations every day, the observations of the local newspaper. It was everybody found it quite fascinating, and people were looking forward to it every night, reading and see what I had to say. Of course, some of the grammar, you look in there and you could tell I worked 12-hour shifts. Just dead beat, but I still sent out the emails to people back home and across the country who wanted to hear what was going on with Katrina.
So you didn't correct all of that. You basically kept it raw.
I kept it raw.
Okay.
The original form, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Now I know it must have been, I do believe it was rewarding, because I know all of the people that I was working with down there were heartbroken at what had happened to the city and really interested in seeing them rebuild and restore what they had. So that must have been pretty rewarding for you. So tell us more about the All President Accounting For story and the sinking. What inspired you to write the book, and how did you go about getting the rights to the story?
Basically, I say it goes back to 73 when I was at Base Honolulu, and I ran across that one crew member who had come off the Jarvis 6 months after the grounding. And I remember what he told me. He says, if anybody ever tells you that they weren't afraid and that they thought they were going to die, they're lying to you. Everybody was afraid. We all thought we were going to die. And he described how the captain had a prayer circle on top of the deck there with people holding hands praying. It was so bad. The ship had lost power. They were going toward Akatan Island, 13 feet of water in the engine room, which had shut down the engines, and the ship rocking back and forth. At one time, they hit a wave, and this day before satellites and stuff, and they hit a wave at night, and it almost overturned the boat. It was a 60-degree angle. And it's actually in the official records of the Coast Guard back east, where it was documented. It was 60 degrees, because some people said, well, that's unrealistic, And some people seem to think it did flip because there was so much water in the engine room that maybe that kept it a little bit upright rather than flipping over.
Yeah.
But several of the crewmen talk about how 1 minute they're walking on the deck, and next minute they're walking on the bulkhead, wondering what was going on. So that I interviewed 35 of the former crew members, and like I said, 15 associate people with the rescue and the response, C-130 pilots. Honolulu Advertiser, they reviewed the book, and the guy had been doing it for decades, and he put a real glowing review about my book and said it was the most thoroughly researched book he'd ever read, because I documented everything, and it's in the back of the book. Although there was one documentation I put in there that nobody ever caught me on, and that was I can't swim.
I can't swim.
And I put a little short story at the beginning of the book about how I was a rescue swimmer designated for this buoy tender during sea trials, and I had to tell the XO that I couldn't swim, and that didn't go over well.
That doesn't go well. I can't imagine that going over well in the Coast Guard or the Navy either. You tend to like people comfortable in the water. Well, how many years did it take you to actually research all of this book? You said it was almost well researched. How long did that take?
It took me 18 months to research it once I started.
Okay.
Because I had to get hold of the official ship records down San Bruno, contact Coast Guard headquarters to see what they had. Then I had to find the crew members, and that was challenging. I figured a lot of them were about my age or a little bit older. I used Facebook to find some of them, but I also paid People Search and some others. And one of the members that stood out the most when you're talking to people was a guy that kept going. He had his own personal skin diving equipment on the ship. And when the engine room flooded, he had to dive in and unclog the hoses as they were trying to get the water out of there. And there was a lot of asbestos and chemicals in there, and it was eating away at his suit. And by his 10th dive, he didn't really have a suit. In fact, at the end, when the ship was finally made at Dutch Harbor, him and 13 others were flown to Anchorage for hypothermia and other issues. But he was one I wanted to talk to at top of the list, because everybody mentioned him as possibly one of the heroes. A lot of people said there weren't any heroes. It was a team effort. But his name was Mike Large. And I'm thinking, that's not an easy name to find.
Yeah.
But I figure because he was a scuba diver, they probably lived on the coast, maybe still did scuba diving, that kind of stuff. And there was 3 Mike Larges. They were all in their late 60s, and one of them lived on the coast of Florida. And I called him up, and I said, "Were you on the Jarvis?" And he said, "Yeah, I was." So like, the needle in the haystack, find that guy.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of great stories.
I bet.
So, but it was, I got great cooperation. I had 2 people hang up on me when I told them what I was doing. One was a pastor in Kentucky, and no explanation, he just hung up. And another one was a guy in the Dalles, Oregon, and he said, "I'm not interested," and he hung up. And then after the book was released, he called me back, and he said, "I thought you were scamming me." And so we've met for lunch and dinner a few times since, and he's given 7 pages of notes that's sitting on my desk. But
Well, I think interviewing, I know some of our authors do a good job at really interviewing all the people involved in an event, and that really makes a difference to get all the perspectives and the stories and the angles. And you learn so much about beyond the details of in doing that. So you got some great reviews on the book. You've interviewed many of the people. Now, were all of them comfortable with you using their story, basically replicating their story? Did you have to get rights in doing that? Tell us a little bit about that process.
I basically asked them all. I asked them all up front, "Are you comfortable with me using your name?" And everybody was 100%. There wasn't anybody.
Good. Tell us a little bit more about your experience. Now, you said your second book was about going to Italy. Now, my wife and I love Italy. I threaten her all the time that we're going to sell the house and move there. She gives me that kind of response, but we love Italy. So tell me about your experience. You said you go back every 18 months. Where have you gone in Italy? What is the book about, and why did you feel compelled to write a book about Italy? Because there's certainly lots of them out there.
Oh yeah. I wrote about Cinque Terre, Venice, Lake Como, a couple other places in there. But I just thought, I liked writing, so I wrote a book about it, put tips in there, and I thought the book could do well. It won a contest for best cover, and so I dropped it off at one of the bookstores in Olympia, and went back a month later, and not a single copy had sold. And I told her, I said, "It's got good reviews." And she goes, "Be frank, Steve," she goes, "books about Italy are a dime a dozen."
Yeah.
It's there's too many books out there. So I still enjoyed writing it.
It's hard not to love Italy.
Yeah. My next one on Italy is going to be on Lake Garda. We went there and spent 3 weeks up there and absolutely loved it. But love northern Italy, and of course the food and people and visiting.
Now, have you been to southern Italy at all?
Only like as far south as Naples, Pompeii.
Okay.
Pompeii is just unbelievable. But that's as far south, and I still think there's other countries I want to visit, like Austria and Croatia, and I still end up in northern Italy. I just I love Rome. But every time I go to Rome, I make sure I walk 3-4 miles a day before I go there, because that's what you're doing most of the time.
Yeah, you do get a lot of exercise, and Rome is my favorite city in the world.
Yeah.
It's magical on every corner.
It's sort of interesting. One time I went there, it's extremely safe, walk around 11, 12 o'clock at night, and I got lost. I went up to a couple policemen and to ask directions, and one policeman, he's not even looking at me, but he nonchalantly pulls out an automatic weapon out of his car, and I'm thinking, well, you don't see that in the States that often, but no, they were extremely helpful, and their subway train systems are, if it says leave at 9:30, at 9:30 it's already leaving.
Yeah.
That's one thing you learn, is they're pretty punctual over there.
Yeah. They do have that. They do have the mass transit down pretty well. Well, tell us more about in your Katrina. Who else did you work with besides the city and the local Coast Guard? Were you part of the rebuilding? I know that they had a lot of work to rebuild the levees and all of that. Tell us about what you were working on down there.
Well, I worked with FEMA. Mostly it was like Coast Guard projects. Like I said, I had to rewrite the continuity operation plans for Sector New Orleans, because that was totally inadequate. That was interesting. One of the locations I went to was the famous aquarium they have in New Orleans, and she was telling me that a lesson learned they found was they had a generator that was guaranteed to operate for like 5-7 days. And she goes, that guarantee means nothing when it shuts down after 3 hours. And they lost all that fish and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good lessons learned as far as emergency management. But like the evacuation plan up in Baton Rouge, that was just sending people out to every parish in New Orleans or in Louisiana and getting the inputs on what they would require as far as evacuation planning. As senior officer up there in Alexandria, was basically just planning on shutting down the unit because we had relocated to Alexandria, and now we were relocating back to Sector New Orleans. And the first thing I found out was Bill was there because of Betty, and Betty was there because of Bob, and Bob was there because of Betty. And I mean, it was just, if you take one out, you didn't need any of them. So I started sending people back the second day I was there and got that unit. One of my strong points is organization. I can take a look at an organization and get it straightened out. I worked at Mobile, Alabama for Deepwater, and I was the incident commander there. We had 500 people in the building, and that was very interesting. We had a third of them were BP employees, so we worked closely with BP on that one, and just reporting back. They sent me there because they had a report that went to the President of the United States every day, and Homeland Security first, and Mobile, Alabama had been late every single day for a month. Nobody else was late, and so they sent me there and said straighten it out, and I was going to wait a day, and it was so messed up I didn't. I started working on it right away, and then I got hold of a BP employee that was one of the managers there, and told him I wanted some help on this, and he said, well, it's a Coast Guard report. And I said that's the wrong idea. I said, it's a joint report. I said, people are not communicating, Coast Guard people are not communicating. It's a joint report. And he said, well, I didn't know that. And I said, it is. It's got both names on it. So he came in and he changed some things that I had, and the first day I was there, we got the report in on time. And the next day we were a half hour early and then an hour early, and I was only there 2 weeks, but the Coast Guard gave me a commendation medal for doing that. So.
Interesting. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Tell us about, I know you're new to the Author Event Network, but tell us a little bit more about your experience in selling books directly to readers in groups like AEN. What has your experience been, and how have you found it to be effective in terms of a way to sell?
The book came out a month before COVID. So you talk about timing. I have 250 books sitting in a closet for 2 years. So, but during that time, I did a lot of sales through Facebook or whatever I could find. I did some, I found magazine articles. They're expensive, and the return was not great. So you learn some lessons learned. Went to Grand Haven for the annual Coast Guard festival over there. It's the biggest one in the United States. And it was just unbelievable seeing a Coast Guard flag in every single yard, and it's a huge event. And that's where I had a table for a weekend. Of course, it rained half the day, which was an author's worst nightmare, but I had everything covered. But I sold 55 books at that event, which is pretty good. You try different things. Now,
was that mainly your Katrina book, or was that the earlier, or was this
one here? Yeah, it was a couple years ago. Katrina book, I was asked to be a guest speaker at several conferences because of that book. I didn't do a lot of selling online or anything, but I was asked to be the speaker in Philadelphia at their emergency management conference, and then I was asked to be a speaker in Rome. That was a tough one. That was the first time I went there. Had to pay my expenses, but I got, they set us up in the student dormitory they had at the fire academy, and it was $15 a night. So you couldn't, you just spend the rest on, wine and food, pasta.
Yeah.
But that was that. Yeah, former director Michael Brown was at the Rome conference, and so he's the one who wrote my foreword to the Katrina book.
Okay.
Because I met him there.
Now, do you travel a lot for all your books, or was it just mainly the Italy one, or how much travel do your books typically require?
The first two didn't much. This one here, I've been traveling a lot because I believe in the book.
But it's mainly travel for sales.
For sales, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I did go to San Bruno to get the ship records. I'm going down in October. I want to do a series like podcasts once I figure out how the heck you do that. But I've got one interview with that guy that turned me down. And I'm going down to Florida because a lot of Coast Guard people retired to Florida. And I'm staying at this chief bosun mate's condo unit. He's got a 2-bedroom and 82 years old and sharp as a tack. And you get him and me on the phone. We're talking sea stories for an hour. So I'm going to use his for a base. I'll be down there for 8 days in October just to try to get 2 or 3 interviews so I can get future podcasts out on this.
Now, in selling directly to people, how do you normally pitch your book? Normally, now when you're at the Coast Guard, I imagine there's a lot of interest. Have you sold the books where it really was more of a general audience?
I have, but I find that where the most interest is somehow Coast Guard related or maritime related. If it's not, the sales are really bad. Okay. But I've made 2 trips to Alaska to promote my book, and I get invited to Coast Guard exchanges or to sell on base. Kodiak, I've done quite well at. They have a brand new bookstore up there. They had relocated to right down near the pier, so you got all those cruise ships coming in. Cruise ships are really good if you can get close to where the people disembark.
Right.
So I've done well with that. Ketchikan is. One day I was there this last year. They had 5 ships, and each one's got 3,000 or 4,000 people, and the 5 ships were there, and the pier area. Then they have all these shops, and so next year I'm hoping to maybe get a spot down there.
That sounds. Yeah, you got to find. I think you've got a little bit of a niche. You got to find those niche audiences and niche opportunities. That sounds right.
Yeah, I found out malls were really bad because all it is young people wandering around with their cell phones, and they don't.
And I don't think that really relates to genre at all. I think that just relates to young people.
I tried it once,
and how much they read. We find that the response that we get often is, "I don't read." My only response is, I'm sorry for you.
Well, I've got the book on audio too when they tell me that.
Exactly.
But young people, yeah.
Well, now, do you have any other books coming out?
I got a book on emergency preparedness for seniors that I was hoping to get out in 2 months, but a lot of things going on in my life, so it looks like that'll probably be January. But that should be popular. I've already got 10 people want to buy the book, and I'm not even halfway done with writing it yet. But we also have a place outside Yuma, Arizona. And one thing, I tried getting in with these RV parks with this book here, and you can't even open the door. There's like 40-some RV parks. And I'm thinking maybe this next book will actually, because for seniors, open the door where I can actually push that and this book as well. That
might be. Now, I want to go back a little bit, just briefly. We only have about 5 minutes left. With all President accounted for, that's a really incredible, unique adventure with a lot of personal stories to it. Have you thought about putting that in a movie form? Have you made any progress in that direction?
No.
Okay.
Yes and no. Everybody says it should be a movie, and I go, yeah.
Okay.
I'm waiting. Where's the offers? People say, yeah, Tom Hanks should be the captain, Captain Woolley, on the ship, who was a very interesting guy. He stopped crew members in the hallway and asked them how their families were. It didn't matter what rank they were, he'd stop and visit with them. Whereas the XO was sort of a disciplinarian, a 300-pound guy. Wouldn't even be allowed in the Coast Guard now, but he had a colorful background. He had gone to the Navy when he was 15. Took his brother's birth certificate and disappeared, and parents finally found out 6 months later when he sent a postcard from Australia, and first thing the wife did was go down to the Navy and say he lied about his age. So the Navy kicked him out, and then a little over a year later he went back to the recruiting office with his dad, who signed him in because he didn't want to go to school, he wanted to go to the Navy, and served a lot of time over there in the South Pacific with the Navy and during Vietnam. And at one time, several people said he was the most decorated person we had in the Coast Guard. But he was, guys said he was disciplinarian, but I think they all said he was a fair guy too. But he was an interesting person as well.
Well, Craig, what do you like most about being an author?
I like relaying the stories, telling the stories about Italy, like my Italy book. it's not only traveling, but our misadventures, I would say, over in Italy. Because anytime you go out of this country, you're gonna, no matter how much you prepared, there's going to be something happening that you weren't prepared for. So I got some of those stories in there, but I just like storytelling. My son served 5 years over in Afghanistan, and I was telling this lieutenant that he's quite a storyteller, and she just looked at me and said, "Yeah, I wonder where he gets that from." But yeah, I like telling the stories.
Well, I'm looking forward to having you as part of the group. I think it's exciting. We have really great dynamics, and we do find that some authors find that they do really well in some events and not so well in other events, and that's part of it. But we're looking forward to having you join us in the booth. And thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you for watching Meet the Author. Come to meet all the AEN authors during the summer and fall and holiday season in Seattle and Portland, and keep on reading.